So our final guest today is George Lambert, who's the president and CEO of the Greater Washington Urban League. George, thank you very much for coming today.
Good morning, David.
Good morning. So where are you coming to us from? Are you in your home or your office?
I am at home. Yep, I'm in home this morning, still teleworking at this point and going to the office maybe once or twice a week.
Okay, so for those who may not know George, George is the head of the Greater Washington Area Urban League. He spent approximately 30 years of his career associated with the Urban League in various parts of the Urban League in Virginia, Ohio, Washington, and since 2014, he's been the head of the Greater Washington Urban League. He is a graduate of Virginia Union University and somebody who is very committed to the Urban League. But for those who may not know what the Urban League does, and I should say that my predecessor at the Economic Club of Washington was the national president of the Urban League, Vernon Jordan. Tell us what the Urban League does and specifically what the Greater Washington Urban League does.
Sure, David, delighted. So first of all, let me say that at our core, we are a civil rights organization. We provide services to many of the residents that we serve, particularly in the District of Columbia, Montgomery County, and also in Prince George's County as well. We help African Americans and underserved communities certainly to reach parity, certainly to reach power and civil rights. That is really the work that we do. We were founded in 1910, at least as a National Urban League in New York. We're still based in New York, at least the national office is. And let me also add a bit of context regarding the Urban League movement. We came about because in the early 90s and so the early 1900s, particularly around about 1910 or so, there was a great migration in this country from the South to the North, particularly for African Americans. They were really migrating to seek a better life in the North, really kind of trying to escape the vestige of the old, if you will, and certainly the Jim Crow attitudes of the South. But guess what? When they got to the North, they found that there was discrimination in the North, discrimination in housing, discrimination in employment, discrimination in many other areas as well. So the NAACP, which was founded in 1909, they took on a battle of really beginning to litigate many of those issues in the courts. But there was another organization needed to really help many of the folks who had gone to the North to navigate their life in the North. And that brought about the founding of the Urban League movement. There are 90 Urban League affiliates around the country I will share with you, and 300 states, so in the District of Columbia as well. So again, our footprint here is Washington, Prince George County.
So the head of the National Urban League, that is who? The current head.
Head of the National Urban League is current head is Mark Morial. Mark Morial, many of you should know, is the former mayor of New Orleans. But
Right.
Some of the other famous leaders of the presidents of the National Urban League have been Whitney Young, Vernon Jordan, who you certainly mentioned and alluded to a bit earlier, and then John Jacob as well. And by the way, Vernon Jordan was the person who really opened the door and for me to have a membership in the Economic Club.
Okay, so let me ask you, where do you get your money from? Is it from the private sector, from the government? Who are the sources of your capital?
It's a hodgepodge of all of those that you have mentioned at this point. Government, state government, federal government. Much of our money comes from foundation, it comes from individuals, it comes from corporations. Many of them are represented on our board of directors as well. So we are probably the operating budget about 5.5 million, but we manage and also administer another 20 million in terms of program funding as well.
So the racial composition of your leadership is not only African American, is that right?
Absolutely. In fact, we were founded as an interracial organization. So it's not only African American, my board of directors is a mixed board as well.
So if somebody said, I want to help deal with the challenges we now have on racial relations, and they wanted to help support the Greater Washington Urban League, what can they do? Can they volunteer? Can they give you money? What are you looking for?
We have, so all of those things as well. But you know what, David, we have been very intentional in terms of really kind of using this opportunity to invite, and we're hearing from many folks at this point, but to invite them to become engaged and certainly become involved with the Urban League. We have an advocacy committee where we're certainly very much involved with regard to what's happening now in the civil unrest space. Our board of directors, they provide wisdom, support to us. Many of them are donors to the organization. Companies, they come to us. We, in fact, work with a number of companies, and what I refer to oftentimes is helping them to navigate through blind spots. For example, many companies now are reaching out, and we've even seen a lot of press, what's going on with some of them as they're really taking a hard look at their iconic brands with regard to, for example, in Chimama, I guess a couple of days or so ago, they decided they wanted to kind of change that brand to be a bit more, I think, in lockstep with where we are as a country now, how we're moving as a country. So we're looking for lots of engagement. We have a Young Professionals, which is a Thursday network. They are very much involved with us in terms of helping us to move the needle, particularly on the social service front. So again, we welcome the involvement of those who have an interest in working with the Greater Washington Urban League.
So you've devoted your entire professional career to this area of endeavor. So why did you choose to do so? You could have gone into many different areas. Why was this the one that you chose?
So, for me, it is a moral compass. I would say it's a passion. And what I will also say to you is that, I also believe that every person, at least every Black person, I should say, in America, really each day is touched by racism. It's really very alive. It lives for us. I find that really when I look at it, we have been shut out oftentimes. We have certainly been denied access, other times. We have been killed while praying in church. And so, that's a lived experience that we deal with every day. My role and what inspires me and kind of my moral compass is that I get to inspire, find talented people to come to work for the Greater Washington Urban League, and then to get them to help us to deliver the goods or certainly deliver the services to those we work to empower.
So as you were growing up, did you experience the kind of police conduct that we've seen recently and unfortunate kind of behavior, or you were able to escape that?
Too many experiences to share, David, but what I will tell you this. So like the mayor, I am a native Washingtonian, so we are a rare breed. Did my early life, grew up in DC. But I had a mother that had lots of wisdom and decided both her sons were probably having challenges and difficulties in Washington, DC, and sent us to a place called York, Pennsylvania, which changed my life. Many times African-American mothers, particularly when they're raising sons, have to do that for their sons. So yes, I experienced it, and that experience really changed my life in terms of opening another door for me.
So as we go forward, do you think that the events we've seen in Atlanta and Minneapolis will spur greater change in race relations, or are you skeptical that actually will happen?
I am very optimistic that we are in a different moment in this time at this point. The fact that, when I kind of look at the marches, the protests, I see that they are multiracial. And I think this is a time we certainly have to take advantage of that particular opportunity. David, you are a historian, you are someone who has lots of deeds in terms of your philanthropy as well. And so I don't know if you can see behind me, but it is my home library. One of the books I pulled off the shelf today from my home library is your book. And your book's about writing about the history of America. And so, where we're at in a moment, this particular moment in time, I don't necessarily envision sitting around the fireplace talking with my grandkids about what's happening in this moment of time, how we miss changing and making an opportunity. I envision how we look at resetting, taking advantage of this moment in time and resetting. And those are the kind of history stories that I want to be able to share with my grandchildren. This is what we did in this particular moment of time. This is how we changed the trajectory, and this is how we move forward. And hopefully there'll be other stories that you'll write about as well.
George, if I'd known you were going to talk about my book, I would have had the entire show with you today. I would have had nobody else. But now you have 4 daughters, or you have 4 children? You have
my wife and I, we have 5 there. I can't call them children anymore. They very quickly remind me they're young adults. So let me say
and you have grandchildren yet?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, I hope they live to grow up in a world that's a little bit different than the world that you grew up in and that I grew up in. But I want to thank you, George, for what you're doing for the Urban League. And that's an impressive library you have behind you. And I want to thank you for being a member of the Economic Club and also for coming on today and letting us know more about it. If people want to send you money, they can send it to your website, which is what?
www.gwl.org.
Okay. And your offices are where? Your main offices?
Our main office is at 14th and Harbor, 2901 14th Street Northwest. We also have a satellite office in Prince George's County, but we provide additional services in Montgomery County as well.
All right, George, thank you very much for coming on and letting us know more about the Greater Washington Urban League. Thank you.
David, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
So I want to thank everybody for coming today and listening. And I want to remind everybody that our recording of this show will be on economicclub.org right after the end of this. And that we have an event coming up next week, June 23rd, with Michael Nydorf and some others that we'll announce shortly. Thank you very much, and thank you to our sponsors. Good day.